I'm Howard Green. Tonight, my co-host Jeffrey Rayport talks with Bob Young, co-founder and chairman of Red Hat. Red Hat is the leading seller of Linux, a computer operating system created by a loose network of volunteer code writers around the world. This software and the open source movement that spawned it could one day topple the industry giants, Bob Young says.
We used to sit around moping about, how are we going to take on Microsoft? And Mad Dog Hall, a very famous guy in this open source world, used to coach us and say, hey guys, keep in mind there are 400 million personal computers on the planet, but there are 6 billion people. Your job is to build the platform for the other 5.6 billion people.
Will Red Hat Linux be the next big thing in software? Bob Young certainly thinks so. In a moment, Jeffrey Rayport finds out why.
Bob Young, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
What is the open source movement all about?
Really very simple concept, which is that the proprietary technology or proprietary software model that we all have come to accept, I'm not sure why, is based on two elements. One is you only get the binaries, the ones and zeros that your computer can understand when you get the software. You don't get the source code, which is the if-then statements and the go-to statements, the software that programmers can work with and can affect change. So programmers can't, when you buy the software, you can't make changes in any practical sense. But actually worse than that is even if you could figure out how to make changes to it, it comes with a license that basically says that if you make any change, you fix a bug that stops your servers from crashing, or you add a feature that solves your users' problems, the vendor can literally have you thrown into jail for doing any changes to the technology at all. Whereas open source is simply the reverse of that. We give you complete source code, and we give it to you under a license that allows you, the user, to do whatever you need to do with the technology for the use of your system.
Now, we all know that there's lots of open source software available on the web, and you can go to various sites and download it, and it's freeware. But the open source software package or software product that has attracted all the attention, it seems, is Linux, an alternative operating system to Windows, Mac OS, Unix. Why is Linux such a big deal?
Okay, where it's such a big deal is simply that what you're enabling is all the programmers literally around the world to contribute to improving the technologies that they are using to build their systems around. And so, of course, the question is, what technologies? And of course, it is in fact the internet itself. The internet is the proof of concept of this open source model, because there is no one in charge of the internet. There's no Internet Inc. There's no, AT&T in charge of rolling it out. So how do you get literally tens of thousands of organizations around the world, how do you enable them to all work cooperatively on a network and have that network actually work at the end of the day? You think you need an AT&T to define the rules and to send a little man out in a van whenever your system doesn't work. But by publishing the source code and publishing it under a license that allows the user to make changes to all the core infrastructure of the internet itself, domain name serving, Apache web servers, even the Linux operating systems, you in the end allow the people responsible for keeping Amazon running or for keeping AT&T's servers running to work with each other, such that Amazon servers can talk to AT&T's servers, AT&T can talk to Lucent servers, Lucent can talk to Cisco servers, and suddenly you don't have to have someone in charge because each of the users can configure their systems to talk to each other much more effectively.
And you mentioned Apache Server, which has become the dominant web server platform for lots and lots of e-commerce sites, about 2/3 of them by last count. And Apache literally is a set of software patches that add up to a system that works, that's quite robust.
Yes. In other words, people keep asking me, when am I going to use Red Hat Linux? And I'm going, well, or use open source software. I said, well, have you ever used the internet? And they go, yeah. And so, well, you realize 66% of all the web pages you have ever looked at are fed to you by the Apache web server. But even more than that, when you type in a little address, www.redhat.com, that gets translated into a number, and that number, the software that controls that number and feeds that message, basically the request for the page across the internet, is called DNS, domain name serving technology. And again, that is 100% open source software.
So we have Apache, we have DNS, and now we've got Linux, which is about the actual operating system on a personal computer not out on the web.
That's right. Linux is, of course, the core of an operating system. It's actually not an operating system itself. It's sort of the poster boy of this operating system. So what you have are engineering teams around the world contributing a wide variety of components. It looks a little bit like the car industry. And what Red Hat is doing is a little bit like a car assembly plant. We take the Apache web server from one team, we build the compilers, and on the other hand, we work with the SendMail guys and the SendMail utility, the DNS name serving tools. And we take all these pieces, build them around this engine of an operating system, which is really the equivalent of what Linux is, and turn it into a useful product in the same way that a car assembly plant takes engines and then tires from Michelin, airbags from TRW, and turns it into a Honda Accord or a Ford Taurus.
Let me understand this, though. To extend your analogy with the auto industry, one of the big challenges to executives at Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Honda is, of course, assuring the quality of what they're getting from their suppliers, be they parts, services, information, data, anything else. Now, it's hard enough to assure quality with a bunch of suppliers who are actually bidding for business and get paid in return, but you're talking about an entire development community that is essentially donating its time to create open source code.
Well, yes and no. I mean, and of course, anytime you have one of these analogies, you start inspecting it. The analogy itself breaks down, and this is really Red Hat's expertise, as we've been doing this now for 6 years, and we've been winning industry awards up against giants like Microsoft and Sun for simply building better operating systems than they're able to build, because we have a bigger engineering team than they have. But quality assurance is very much our responsibility, and it looks a little bit like the car industry in the sense we very much do work with the Apache team, and we work with the SendMail team, and we have tight relationships with all of these development teams. But software changes from cars in the sense that you actually have to build a factory to build a transmission. In software is really a form of expression. It's more akin to writing a poem than it is to building a transmission.
You mean so our viewers should now eliminate images of the River Rouge plant outside Detroit? We should start thinking about something quite a bit more abstract.
In effect, of course, to our engineers, they don't think of it as abstract as all. They think of every bit as tangible as a... But nonetheless, the model breaks down pretty quick, or the analogy breaks down pretty quickly. But the power of the model is by publishing the code, the users and the engineers in those users, or companies those users employ, can actually use this stuff to build simply more stable, more reliable systems. Simply because, if you run into a bug on a proprietary binary-only piece of software, well, yeah, you'll learn to live with the bug because you have no way of fixing it. You can report it to the manufacturer. If it's an important bug and affects a lot of his customers, he might fix it.
Right, or you can hope that you go to their site and somebody else has complained before and there's a software patch that you can download to fix that.
Exactly. Imagine now, though, that you're the only person on the planet, or only one of a couple of hundred people on the planet who have ever seen this particular bug, and it's a material bug to your needs. It's causing your server to crash on a regular basis. The manufacturer says, look, I've got 1,000 other bugs to work on, most of which affect most of my customers. Why would I ever address this one? In the open source world, you can come to Red Hat, and we might actually have the same reaction. We might say, we got this long list of issues, features that our customers want us to address. Why would we add the feature that only affects you and a couple of your friends? But under our model, you've got the right to fix it yourself. So it's a little bit like a car, using my car analogy in a different way this time. Imagine buying a car with the hood locked shut, such that you had to take it back to the dealer. And suddenly if that dealer overcharged you for fixing it, or simply didn't fix the rattle in the engine that you were complaining about, or refused to install the musical horn you always wanted, because the hood is locked shut and the dealer is the only guy with the key, you are beholden to that dealer. If he doesn't fix it, if it keeps rattling, you learn to live with the rattle. If he overcharges you, you learn to put up with being overcharged.